And it was his first attempt. It was his first shot at lobbying. And he was just mind blowing. He was like, they took us out on cruises. They had these big state dinners for us. This was just a small piece of legislation, James. Imagine if suddenly a new regulation came out that was going to affect Visa, MasterCard. Can you imagine the whining and dining that would go on?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm always curious about that. It was like, what? Because you took me on your boat and you gave me food. I'm going to do what you say.
Yeah.
I'll sell out real quick, but like you got to put a bag of cash.
Right? You and me both, bro.
Welcome to the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, welcome to the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. Today, we are very excited to have in studio with us James Huber, Managing Partner of Global Legal Law Firm, as well as special guest joining us on Zoom, Patti Murphy of ProScribes Inc. Patti, thank you so much. You've got tons of experience in the payment space. Really looking forward to this conversation. Jump right in.
Tons of experience, and a lot of people probably don't know me as ProScribes Inc. They know me as the green sheet. They know me as the big mouth who's always talking about whatever that has to do with payments. I like to refer to myself as the payments maven of the fourth state. I got started in this, like everybody else. I got started totally by accident. I got out of college. I was young when I got out of college, and so I got an internship with a bank regulatory agency. And one of my jobs was to compile the daily news digests for the senior staff. It's a great way to learn about banking. So I did that for quite a few years. Well, not quite a few, probably about 4 or 5 years. And then I went out and sold myself as a banking reporter. Now, mind you, I graduated from college with a journalism degree thinking I would write for Rolling Stone or the New York Times, but instead here I am. So when I started writing about payments, it was really, electronic payments was very new. In fact, they didn't even call ATMs. They called them customer bank communication terminals.
Wow.
Yeah. What a boring name. But so I really got in on the ground floor when debit cards. It was in the early '80s when debit cards was first coming out. Visa, MasterCard were really amping up the efforts to get cards into more merchants' hands. They're pricing them low, getting them into more merchants' hands. I did a bunch of newsletters back in those days. Newsletters were all the rage. And I happened to do one on checks. I had a newsletter on checks. At the time, we were writing like 50 billion checks a year. I met Paul Green. I was putting on a conference. I met Paul Green. We hit it off. Before you knew it, Paul was asking me to write for the green sheet. That was 20 years ago. Before that, I wasn't really big into, I didn't know a whole lot about credit card acquiring and all those nuances. All I knew were I had spent a lot of time in Washington covering the Fed and Congress, so I knew the laws and the regulations, which sort of gave me a different perspective on things. And anybody who's read me over the years has seen, that different perspective continues to change. But that's the short of it.
I'm curious, Patti, when you were reporting on banking, that's not a topic that the banks like to be reported on, right? They like to keep their own stuff down. So how were you received not in the marketplace, but for your subjects? I mean, were you having to? I
actually did really well. Part of the time I was there was during the thrift crisis when all the savings and loans were crashing. So there it was just sort of like mob journalism, right?
Right.
But after that, one of the things I used to really pride myself on is, and what I do pride myself on is taking the most complex subjects and making them understandable for everybody. And so I would get, ATA girls from the big banks as well as from the Fed and the other regulators, which I always thought was great. If they, if they weren't complaining, then I was doing my job right. And the banks, they don't like to talk to people, but once you make friends with the right people at the bank, it's not that hard. And I was really lucky in those days. There were a lot of cash management was one of the areas I covered. A lot of big cash management banks, a lot of things going on. And I like to say I had a good personality to go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I think the biggest thing that, I didn't know until I was in law school is the bank doesn't have your money. I went down there and I was like, I just want to take all my money out. I don't know what I wanted to do. Maybe I wanted to roll around with my, $800 or whatever it was. But they said it was more, I think it was like $11,000. It was like what they give you, the school gives you, or student loans or whatever.
Right. And
I was like, I want it out of here. And they're like, we don't have it. And I'm in downtown San Diego at US Bank, and they're going, yeah, we don't have that here. And I'm going, you don't have $11,000 here?
Nope. Yeah.
And that I found that like it blew my mind. And then I didn't really learn how nobody has it until even much later. Can you break that down in the way of how banks actually don't have our money and why?
Let's see if I can figure this out. I go in, I make a deposit. In most cases, it's a check deposit anyway, right? It's not a cash deposit. Those checks go into a clearing system that goes through the Federal Reserve. That money is posted to let's say it's a check you write me a check for $1,000. That $1,000 is posted to my bank account or my bank's account at the Fed. And that's basically where it stays until, every couple of days, a bank will call up and say to the Fed, hey, we need about $5,000 in ones, fives, and coins. Can you deliver it to us? And the Fed comes up with an armored truck and delivers it to it. But all those big boxes that you see on the streets, all they're doing is writing numbers in ledgers.
Right. And to add to that, what I didn't learn until much later is that the bank takes your money, 90% of it, and goes and lends it out. Goes and plays with it. And then where they go play with it, they take 90%. And then they go play with it. And it goes layer, right, where money's not even real anymore.
No, because you're making money like let's say you borrow $100 and then you're making $105, right? Well, where did that $5 come from?
Where did it come from?
That's something that's always blown my mind as well. But the lending process, between the lending process and the Fed storage process, no wonder you couldn't get your $11,000.
Well, that's probably for the better, actually.
Yeah, you would have rolled around in it.
Yeah, they might have done you a favor there, James.
Well, yeah. And well, I think what I didn't realize too is that $11,000 is like that much money. So
yeah.
But maybe they would have given it to me in ones. Okay, so since money's not even real,
right?
We don't even know where it comes from, and it's not really even regulated.
No.
And here comes electronic payments, where we've been in the space like 16, 17 years at this point.
Uh-huh.
And when we got in, it was just moving away from knuckle busters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was the true Wild West. These were car salesmen, getting off the lot, going and saying, hey, I can sell this and make way more money.
Right.
So that's where we've started out. And now, we still represent sales organizations and they've had to change. But there has been really no regulation. When we bring in new attorneys or people that are working on this stuff, we go, they're always like, what can I read? Like, where are the rules? In the law, we're like, tell us the rules so that we can then, tell our clients how to go break them. But where are what are the rules that apply to payments?
The only rules that really apply are what's in the examination handbooks. Bank examiners go into a bank, they have these rules sort of like that the regulatory agency is written. You can't lend to these people, you can't give more than 10,000 in cash, you got to have all these auditing procedures in place. And they go through these handbooks and they write up a report at the end of a week or two and say, yeah, this bank is doing okay, or this bank isn't doing okay, we better put it on a watch list.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really that's one of the reasons why people like, why am I pulling a blank on this? The congressman who passed the Durbin Amendment, Senator Durbin. It's
right.
The reason why Senator Durbin and people like him get so far, because there's nothing out there that really regulates credit cards. Credit cards are a consumer issue. They're also a small business issue, which is really kind of a consumer issue as well. And this is one of the things that worries me, and I think should keep some people up at night in this business. Nobody expected the Durbin Amendment to be passed because basically it got slipped into a very big piece of legislation late at night when nobody was watching. The same thing could happen with the Credit Card Competition Act.
Yeah, and that's concerning. I mean, the Durbin Amendment exists. I like it. I'm happy that there is some regulation because they know we exist. We know that, trillions of dollars aren't just, totally blind to the people that are, supposed to be keeping us safe. And I'm happy there's something there. I like that Mr. Durbin has enough power. I think during COVID, when they were saying, hey, we're going to jump the rates, Durbin said, you're going to what? And they said, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
And, but I agree. I think I was on your and James's podcast, James Shepard's podcast, when the Credit Card Competition Act first came out.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going, this thing is a nightmare.
Oh, absolute nightmare. I mean, the thing that blows my mind is that whoever wrote the law didn't really understand how the system worked.
Right. Well, the part I liked about it was that it seemed to want to break up the Visa and MasterCard monopoly. I think we all agree, everybody in the industry will agree that Visa in particular has a humongous monopoly on credit cards. That's a yes. Yes, we have our class action against Visa, and they're going, what are you talking about? There's tons of other networks.
Yeah, sure. None as big as you are.
Right.
James, do you remember, you may not remember this, but years and years ago, there was a show called Rowan and Martin's Laughing. And Lily Tomlin would play a telephone operator.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Remember that? And she would always mess everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And her line would always be, we don't care. We're the telephone company.
Right.
I think of Visa sometimes about that. We don't care. We're Visa. We're so big. We run everything, and everybody has to do what we say they have to do.
And when we say, I mean, you said it, the banks are governed by their own internal rules that most of us haven't seen.
Right.
I can sometimes get them through a subpoena, but Visa's rules, it's largely the same thing. It's just self-governance. And these rules, I always talk about, I'm reading through and I'm like, oh, I finally found what I'm looking for. Oh, but this only applies to the Crimea region or Eastern Australia.
Right.
And when we did a presentation with Rob Johnson from Visa, and we're all beating him up saying, hey, this surcharge cap is ridiculous and stop fining people. You're like, just let us surcharge debit cards and raise the rate a little bit. It will be cool. He's like, well, you know what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the card brand rules. And it's like, great, because nobody cares about the card brand rules. I will walk into a courtroom and judges at trial be like, well, Your Honor, they're violating the card brand rules.
And they'll say, who cares?
And they'll say, if it were illegal, they'd be in jail. I was like, well, these are the only rules that exist. Those are the only what?
Right. And that's the thing. It's been an industry that's been running rampant for years, and getting your arms around it, that's what I mean. In a way, I like Durbin because he is trying to get his arms around it. It's just that the people he has doing the work don't understand how the system works.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's so interesting because everybody, I think every single person I've talked to has said, no, this is a nightmare, who has any knowledge. So I just wonder who's helping him. Why not call? I mean, obviously he should just call me, but
obviously,
he hasn't. I'm waiting, spend every day waiting for him to call.
Stand by the phone with bated breath and hopes that he does, but
he doesn't.
But there's another thing in Washington I think people are probably may or may not be familiar with, which is the debit interchange issue. Debit interchange is something that is regulated right now. And the Fed is proposing what I would call a buzz cut, or maybe a buzz kill, that would lower the permissible cap to 14.4 cents, down from about 21 cents. That's a significant haircut. And and this is the other thing that also I find interesting. Debit interchange regulations apply to any financial institution with more than $10 billion. The new Credit Card Competition Act is going to apply to any financial institution with more than $100 billion. So as time goes on and banks get bigger, the limits on regulations keep going up. I don't know about you, James, but a $10 billion bank is still a pretty significant sized bank in my book.
Yeah, they can probably keep my $11,000, but
I'm sure.
What can you explain how that cap will work? Who does that affect? Is it just the bank? Does the cardholder get any benefit?
The cardholder isn't getting any benefit. Only the merchant's getting any benefit from that. And the bank is being screwed by it because the bank is used to getting the debit interchange. It's the reason why banks handed out all those debit cards back in the 80s and continue to hand out those debit cards, because every time you and I go to an ATM or use it at a supermarket, they're getting some interchange. And right now, they're getting about 21 cents interchange if it's a debit card drawn on, say, B of A, Wells, Chase, Citi, any of the really big banks, right? If it's a smaller bank, if it's a credit union, the sky's the limit.
Right.
They can charge as much interchange as they feel like.
And who is it if it's just on the debit rail? So if I don't use my PIN, am I still on the debit rails?
No.
So I get kicked off. So I have to punch in my PIN for the bank to really benefit, because that's way higher than they get on the credit card side.
Way higher. Way higher.
What do they get on the credit card side? 0.0003%?
Yeah, maybe, or maybe 30 basis points.
Right. So for the debit network, I mean, every single card in my wallet has debit capability.
Mm-hmm.
Minus, I mean, I think my credit card has it too, but that's separate. It's
isn't that usually like what do they call it? A cash advance or something?
Yeah. So every card has a PIN associated with it. Yeah. I think that you can do a cash advance, but nobody should be doing that on their credit card ever. But so all of my cards are debit enabled. And what are people talking about of we want to stop the banks making so much money when these are the banks, the 10 billion ones that are collapsing?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, they're just really, and it kind of reminds me of back in the 1980s when the thrifts were collapsing. It's like we're just making for bigger and bigger banks up on the top. Because, you know,
what
when
do you
those
think
banks,
they're trying to do here? They're trying to centralize banking.
I don't think that's exactly what they're trying to do, but I think that could happen. I don't think it's a plan, but I think it could happen.
But
I mean, let's face it, James, we have at least 10,000 financial institutions in this country. What do they have in Canada? 12?
Right.
6 in the UK, maybe? I mean, 10,000 financial institutions is a lot of financial institutions. I'm not saying, 9,500 should go away, but maybe something fewer than 10,000 is gonna be what we're gonna end up with.
But how does that benefit anybody? Isn't having a broader marketplace? I know that when we love our little credit union over across the street. And when I go buy a car, they're like, hey, I got pre-approved online and this and this and this. And then they go, oh, wait, here. No, we run it through. We have this relationship with the little bank of here's a lower interest rate. Just take the car, basically.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I don't know who's going to benefit from this, but I think credit unions are going to be the last to go because they are the people's bank.
Right. So, some banks, I don't want to say every bank, a lot of banks that we see, they have no idea what they're doing. And particularly related to payments, we run into a big surprise. We run into the banks that don't know what they're doing because they're the ones involved in litigation. And it's kind of an afterthought because for a long time, and it's starting to change, but the banks weren't even making that much money off of this is from the sponsor bank perspective. They're starting to change because I think they're getting wiser and they're seeing that, there's actually a bunch of liability, but a bunch of the big guys are gone. Is there any conversation? I don't want to say at your level, but where you're watching related to the bank's participations in the payment network, in the electronic payments industry?
No, there isn't. The conversations I've heard, and this has been a few years, is more reticence.
Yeah.
They don't want to get caught up in all the quagmire. It's like, let's Chase, let all those big guys take care of it because it's too much of a hassle. When you have things like chargebacks, when you have things like Visa, MasterCard regulations that you got to fill, when you have things like Senator Durbin trying to further regulate the industry, would you want to get into a business like that?
Not as a sponsor bank. I mean, if I'm sitting on the board, I'm going,
no way.
Yeah, you need to be really selective. One of the issues I think for these banks is they're looking for ways to make more revenue because what we're talking about is they're getting squeezed. Yes. And so they're, so-and-so sees, the guy pull up in his Ferrari to the golf course. He's going, what are you doing? He's like, hey, I'm in the payment space, and he's going, hey, I'm, vice president of a bank. Where's my Ferrari?
I think I'll go get a Ferrari. I think I'll go get into the payments and get a Ferrari.
And they think they will. I mean, we see this a lot of times is they like it. It looks sexy. There's lots of money. It's cool. It's a whole different way of working from being a banker, James, right? I mean, bankers sit behind their desk and they wait for people to come to them. Right. And it's stuffy and it's boring. And now, we don't have any more ISO clients. They're all fintech companies, right? So now we're in fintech and you've got a Ferrari and let's do it. Oh, let's go to these conferences that aren't banking conferences.
Oh, and by the way, there's neobanking. Let's not forget neobanking, the whole concept of piggybacking, on the banking system so that you can have a totally online bank. That's
right.
that's a hot topic these days because they don't have any of the brick and mortar investment necessary, so they can offer far better benefits.
I never want to go into my bank. Actually, I haven't been into a bank for a year. I think our bankers, they come to us now because they probably know I'm out of here.
I had to go to my bank for something.
A lollipop.
My credit union for something. I can't remember even what it was. It was about a month or two ago. It was during working hours and the door was locked.
Oh, I bet it was.
I was like, then they saw me and they unlocked it and let me go in and get whatever it was that I needed to get. But this was like not even in a bad hard town.
They saw you coming.
Yes, that's it. Here comes Murphy.
I got a quick question for you, kind of coming from a perspective, maybe that from the listeners. You're mentioning that the banks are getting the squeeze here. We see on our end a lot as well, Patti. The merchants definitely get the squeeze.
Oh, yes.
Who's winning here? Is it just Visa and MasterCard? Who are the winners in this situation?
They are the only winners. And in fact, it's funny. I tell my friends who are investors, invest in Visa, invest in MasterCard, invest in PayPal. They're recession proof. You're never going to lose money because all they do is make money.
That's it. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we, ever since COVID, when we saw that electronic payments truly is recession proof,
right?
We started our firm in the payment space during the last big the financial crisis of 2008. Mm-hmm. And payments was still booming.
Right.
It was fabulous. And, Chris and I were hilarious because we're sitting here and they're like, recession's coming, recession. And we're like, come on, recession.
Right.
Great for payments. Anytime there's change, our firm does really well because it's a shift. Even we're huge. We're very much against the surcharge cap and how they're enforcing that. But that happening has created a ton of disputes. And, we're all of a sudden important. And it's one of the big issues in the space that we've been talking about. It is so underregulated. When I was talking to the Visa guy, Rob Johnson, he's like, look, we can all agree we don't want regulation. But all of us out on the street, we do want regulation because we want to know what rails to operate within so that, again, my attorney can tell me to break them. Because right now, my attorney is just telling me to break non-existent rules.
Right. And at least you have something that you can look at and say, OK, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Or instead, what you have is I'm just going to go about business. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Visa comes and goes, thwack. Nope, you can't do that.
Yeah. Or the DOJ, we're discussing briefly, and this is probably a topic for another day, but they just came down on a company that was, had, fake accounts and they're load balancing, maybe selling real products, maybe not. But that's not, it probably is money laundering, but it's so widely done in this industry that it's going, look, if somebody will tell me that I can't do this, I will. I will not do it, or I will do it with the awareness that, I better have, my Bahamas bank account and the chopper on the roof ready to go. Because otherwise, these people, they're working hard and they're doing this and they're, making money and, supporting people without knowing what they're doing is even wrong.
James, let me just turn this around a little bit, since we know that I am an interviewer by nature. But something else that's been going on in Washington that's been talked about a lot is junk fees. I feel that could hit our industry.
I think it could. Right now, they're kind of they've said in the beginning they were saying no, we're not going there.
Right.
But the thing with the way I look at junk fees, the best example is Ticketmaster. It's always different. I don't know what's in there.
Never know what you're going to pay. Right.
You have no idea what you're going to pay with our fees, not the law firm's fees, but in our industry.
Right.
It's, 3% interchange here, where the problem is, yeah, I see some sales organizations selling a lot of junky fees.
Right.
Where it absolutely could go, interchange.
Yeah.
There's 100. Last time I checked, and it was like 10 years ago, there's 173 different interchange levels.
Yeah, it's a lot more than that now.
But you're bundling it, but you're not.
Right.
So, when we get into a lawsuit and I go, hey, you're padding the fees. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm paying. You're paying me incorrectly. I am always correct, because by design, the best example is the kilobyte fee. It's a dynamic fee that's constantly moving.
Right.
They will say under oath, we estimate it.
I know. Isn't that, that always blows my mind, man. I have a rental unit on my property. And so I had somebody put in a little kilowatt reader so I could charge them usage. So I didn't have to pay both electric bills. I finally threw my hands up on that. It was like, wait a minute, this number in no way corresponds with the number that's on my bill. And then I've been arguing with them for about 2 years, James. And not yesterday, last week, I got a bill from the electric company for $6.97. Guess they figured out finally.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I could see it. I could see it getting there. And that would be scary. Yeah. But I don't see it going to the high level of affecting what you said, the guys that are Teflon at the top, because they spend so much money lobbying. I think that is 99% of the reason that there is no regulation. Originally, we were going, it's too complex to be regulated. Even the guy that tried to regulate it. And I think originally it was too complex, but then it became too profitable. It became too profitable, and it's also now common knowledge. COVID was great for the industry in a lot of ways, because now people understand. When I go to the courtroom, an old judge will be like, why don't you guys just use cash? I don't even use my credit card. But now everybody's used it. Everybody understands that small businesses pay these fees. And big businesses pay to keep the fees where they are. Right. And Visa and MasterCard pay to keep their fees exorbitantly high. Yeah. I last summer, a friend of mine asked me to edit a book, and that he was writing on it was the Check 21 Act. That was the legislation that electronified checks. And he had a whole chapter in there about lobbying. And it was his first attempt. It was his first shot at lobbying. And he was just mind blown. He was like, they took us out on cruises. They had these big state dinners for us. This was just a small piece of legislation, James. Imagine if suddenly a new regulation came out that was going to affect Visa and MasterCard. Can you imagine the whining and dining that would go on? Oh, I'm sure. I'm always curious about that. I was like, what? Because you took me on your boat and you gave me food. I'm going to do what you say. Yeah. I'll sell out real quick, but you got to put a bag of cash. Right. You and me both, bro. Yeah. I think the one other thing that's interesting is how closely Congress is looking at some of these big deals involving banks, namely the Capital One Discover merger deal. Yeah. Senate Majority Leader Schumer has already raised concerns. I think this could be good for competition, frankly. I think it'd be great. I've never even seen a Discover card. I actually use my Discover card more than almost anything else I use, because it has the best rewards of anything. I'm sure it does. And that's why I can't get one in my wallet. But yeah, no, I think that, Capital One is a huge player. Right. And I think it's great. I think that they should be pushing this up, but guess who's pushing it down? Yeah. The bad guys. But, if you had a Discover Cap One, that actually would make that Credit Card Competition Act
far more viable.
It would.
Discover has the rails.
Yep. Yeah. No, yeah, then it would. Yeah. Okay. So then, yeah, let's prop Discover up. I mean, my thing, I like to, be angry at Visa mostly a lot, but it is pretty cool to be able to walk up to something and pop my phone. I'm told you're not even going to need to get out of your car to get gas soon.
Yeah.
And
I have to admit, taking my card, touching a soda machine and having a can of soda come out. The first time that happened in an airport, my mind was blown.
I love it. And it is cool. And one of the reasons we really love the space is it's always changing and people are getting smarter and thinking about it. I don't know.
That is exactly why I love this space. I have friends that say to me, 40 plus years you've been writing about payments. Why? And I said, because it constantly changes. There's always something new that I get to write about and learn about.
And I know that MasterCard puts on where they, give out grants to tech companies and stuff like that. Does Visa do any of that?
Yes, it does.
They do it too. All right.
They both do it. And in fact, they're both very good also at working with the underbanked, not necessarily in this country, but in India and places like that. They've been really contributing a lot to building some of those networks for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah.
But the fact is
they're
that
not altruistic, Patty. They're not just doing that out of altruism.
Not. I don't think so. But the fact of the matter is that in a lot of these countries, there was no way to exchange value for merchants and customers to exchange value. They couldn't carry cash around all the time.
No, I know what's the one in Africa that took off gangbusters?
K something.
Yeah, and they all of a sudden people are going, oh my gosh, I can buy and sell stuff without
K-Penza, I think that's what it's called.
Right.
K-Penza. Yeah.
Without literally going and trading a goat. So
there was a guy that ran an ISO down in Texas about 10, 15 years ago, went to India and built one of those networks.
Yeah.
Called me from India. It's like, Patty, I'm making more money over here in India than I made selling merchant services in the US.
I bet.
Of course. Well, Patty, thanks for coming on. Any closing thoughts? Anything we need to know that's, gonna come attack us from right field?
The only thing I can say is listen to the Merchant Sales Podcast, please.
Yeah, please, Patty, would you tell our audience, how can they find you? How do you want them to see, find you online, et cetera?
Anytime what I do is I'm a writer by profession. So I do a lot of writing for people in addition to, to the green sheet. If you're interested in getting a hold of me, Patti, Patti, at Proscribes Inc., just like it sounds, PROSCRIBESINC. Although I usually do Proscribes Inc. with a K just because it looks cool.
That does sound cool too.
Yeah, when I'm talking to people, right? Like, put it on the letterhead just so it looks good. But
yeah, love it. All right,
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Love to do this again sometime, guys.
Yeah, great
You
conversation.
got it. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. Visit us online today at globallegallawfirm.com.